From racism to reconciliation, sharing visions of Nanaimo's future. A frank discussion about racism here in the Harbor City that we're going to share with you today. On today's show, music and kids. Rick Scott and the Child Development Center, Just for Kicks, connecting special needs and soccer, and avocado chocolate pudding. That and more in the next 30 minutes. You are watching Go Island on Shaw TV Channel 4. From racism to reconciliation, sharing visions of Nanaimo's future is an opportunity to discuss racism in the Harbor City. It all stems from a letter that was published in the Nanaimo Daily News on March the 27th. It very quickly went viral. It is a racist letter, and it's arguable that it was that moment that Nanaimo gained a reputation internationally as being a racist city. That is not okay with a lot of the community members here. This forum is meant to address that directly, frankly, and honestly, and we're going to share that with you on this edition of Go Island. But first, music is an international language, and it is one that is sung, spoken loudly at the Child Development Center in Nanaimo. Here's Kelly Robinson. The first ever Child Development Telethon will be broadcast live on Shaw TV from the Port Theatre on September the 29th, and they are taking names of performers or people who want to appear to make their check presentations, and you can contact Stephen through the numbers that you see on your screen. You are watching Go Island on Shaw TV Channel 4. From racism to reconciliation, discussing Nanaimo's future vision. I don't know if we can dare say without racism. Dr. Ralph Nielsen is president of Vancouver Island University. Is that an ideal we should be striving for, a city without racism?
I think elimination of the harmful feelings and the harmful effects of racism is something that, so yes, we can definitely strive for. You know, we want to build a community where we support each other, where we have a community of mutuality, which means, you know, mutual understandings, respect, and taking the responsibility to ensure that we don't harm each other.
This all stems back to a letter to the editor that was published on March the 27th. I'm resisting asking if that was irresponsible to publish that letter, but maybe that is the question in the center of all of this.
Yeah, maybe, but you can look at it in a variety of different ways. It was an expression of something that exists within the community, and it gives an opportunity now to get it on the table. So in some ways you can say, well, it wasn't a bad thing to have the letter published. It was a harmful thing. It was a very hurtful thing. But when you move to it, you say, now it gives us an opportunity to establish the kind of dialogues that we're having here tonight.
What was some of the dialogue that happened at the university after the letter was published that brought you here today?
Well, it was a clear expression of the difficulty. We welcome into our community one of the largest number of Aboriginal students of any university in British Columbia. It's over 2,000 students. They come from all over the province. They come from all over Canada. And in a community of Nanaimo, community of Cowichan, community of Powell River. And we're very proud of that. And we're very proud of the fact that in our institution, we provide space for that respect. We hire elders who have a different way of knowing and understanding in terms of their education than what I had when I was going through and getting my PhD. Yet they're a part of our community, respected, and are indeed faculty within our institution. When we see the kind of interpretation that is provided in the kind of language we saw in the letter that was published, that hurts people and indeed is derogatory, we have to say, well, is that okay within a community of people who really do support each other, a community that has a level of respect that isn't represented by what we see? So how do we get that on the table, and how do we discuss it, and how do we think about, is that acceptable in our community? And really the challenge we're getting at here is, how do we provide dialogues that help educate people? Because I think really at the core of this is a lack of understanding. It's not a people being mean-spirited necessarily, but more of a lack of understanding. And what responsibility do we have as a collective of people to ensure that people have the kind of information so that they are informed and maybe can help them understand in a way that doesn't allow them to express the type of hurtful things that we can see and you do experience within racist environments.
The discussion, this is the first in a series, but we don't know, you don't know exactly what is going to come out of this moving forward.
No, I think it's very important dialogue tonight, and it's going to be a dialogue that helps us understand more, and maybe people will be bringing forward, well, people will be bringing forward a number of different ideas, And what we're hoping is we're going to see a number of these ideas, and I think we're going to have different pathways to follow in terms of exploring more about what it means to be a community that does not accept a racist environment, a community that respects and supports each other, a community that works from a basis of as Chief White talks about, a love of each other in a way that ensures that people are supported, and a fundamental respect of each other that comes from understanding that there are differences in values, there are differences in the places that we come from, but all of those add to the wonderful environment that we have, and they don't detract from it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That discussion is going on right now, and Dr. Ralph Nielsen will let him get back to it so he doesn't miss any more than he absolutely has to. We'll be back with more after a short break. We're going to have a conversation with Chief Doug White. Still ahead today on Go Island, special needs kids connecting on the soccer field, avocado chocolate pudding, and in conversation with Chief Douglas White. That and more still to come today on Go. You are watching Go Island on Shaw TV Channel 4. From racism to reconciliation, sharing visions of Nanaimo's future is currently underway here at the Vancouver Island Conference Centre. We're going to open up the microphones for some public sharing in just a few minutes. One of the presentations, one of the speakers who started the evening off made a point that really hit home with me. I'd never heard it said so clearly before, that racism is based on two pre-colonial policies. The first one being assimilation policy, and that is take the Indian out of the Indian. You've maybe heard that phrase before. And the other is the denial policy, that when settlers came to British Columbia and other areas, that there was no acknowledgement that humans already lived and already existed here. That is the denial policy. Those are pre-colonial foundations for racism. Tonight's discussion focuses on how we can move beyond that and how to embrace your neighbors, all your neighbors, from a place coming from love. That was said by Douglas Chief White of the Nanaimo First Nation. We're going to talk with him later on this edition of Go Island. It's time now, though, to introduce you to a young woman named Haley Ferguson. She's only 16 years old, is a new volunteer with us here at Shaw TV, and she put together this story about, well, soccer for people who otherwise might not be able to play. You're watching Go Island on Shaw TV Channel 4. From racism to reconciliation, an open discussion about Nanaimo's future vision, a city that embraces their neighbors with love instead of writing letters that are hurtful. This all stems from a letter to the editor that was published in the Nanaimo Daily News on March the 27th. Chief Douglas White of the Nanaimo First Nation remembers that day very clearly. How'd you feel when you read that letter?
Well, it was like a punch to the stomach. When I read the letter that morning on March 27th was a day when the Nanaimo First Nation was entering into a reconciliation agreement with the provincial government. Right. And so there was a day of great hope, and it was a major achievement and accomplishment, one of the most significant agreements in our history. And to have that letter come out on that day in the way that it did was really shocking. And there was something unique about this letter. When I read the letter, when you feel the hurt and the thoughts that were expressed in the letter and the way that they were put, there was something different about it, and it was very upsetting.
At the beginning of your presentation tonight, you said a few words before the microphones are opened up to the public, and you started with thanks. Mm-hmm. And you started being grateful for someone doing something that is hurtful. How does that go? Yeah, no, you know, what I spoke about in the opening comments was that I was very appreciative of the fact that people responded to our invitation to come to this important community event. That they demonstrated by their presence that they care about this community, that they have something to say about its future, and so I really was grateful for that. And I think that the letter itself, I'm not thankful for the letter, but I think that there was a very strong condemnation of it, which was good, and it wasn't just from the Nanaimo people or Indigenous people, it was from all Canadians, very loudly condemned the letter and its contents, the fact that it was published. But what I talked about was wanting to shift as soon as we could away from that specific incident, not to give any time or attention unnecessarily to the inner ramblings of someone who's not well in that way,
and shift as quick as we can to a discussion that addresses what the letter illuminates, that there's an issue in our society that we should talk about and address.
Do you think that issue is more prevalent here in Nanaimo than it is in other communities of a similar size?
I don't think so. I mean, this is one of the troubling things about the letter is that I don't think it doesn't reflect the Nanaimo that I know well. Certainly I know that there's racism in the town, but I don't think it's a huge prevalent issue. And so it's upsetting to, I was recently in New York and someone asked me where I was from and I said Nanaimo and they said, oh, is that the town that is the really racist town? And I was just shocked. I'm like, I can't believe this. And I'm like, why do you say that? And they said, well, wasn't there a really racist letter in the paper or something? And so they knew about it on the other side of the country, in another country, in New York City. And so what I said is, I think this is our challenge, is to replace that story with a new story.
Make this one go viral. Yeah. Make this conversation, dialogue that's happening. Make this conversation viral.
Tonight. And when people think about Nanaimo, I hope that in a year they'll be astonished at the incredible work we've done as a community and a society to address the negative elements illuminated by that ugly letter.
Okay, we're going to come back and ask what you would say to the letter writer if you had the chance, or maybe you have directly, and how can we actually address racism to make some change moving forward. Time for a short break. We'll be back with Doug White in just a moment. You're watching Go Island on Shaw TV Channel 4. From racism to reconciliation, sharing Nanaimo's vision of the future. Chief Douglas White, if you could, and maybe you have spoken directly to the letter writer, Don Olson, it's no secret he lives in Nanaimo, what would you say? What have you said?
I haven't had a chance to, I don't know him, I haven't had a chance to meet him or talk to him. I don't think, I wouldn't want to focus so much on this individual and what he said. I would certainly want to, in general, what we need to do to address the ideas that he put forward are, we need to address the fundamental ignorance is the foundation of racism.
Yes.
The thoughts that he conveyed are wrong, they're incorrect, they come from a different era. I was just in the United Nations in New York talking about how the doctrine of discovery, that's the principle that's been used in international law that says that, indigenous peoples around the world are not really quite human, but there's something less, they don't have organized societies, and therefore we can take over their territories. That ugly idea that's been at the foundation of so much of the misery of our peoples over the last 100 and plus years were expressed in his letter. It's the same issue. And it's the same ugly ideas that are at the foundation of residential schools, at the foundation of the dispossession of us from our territories, this idea that there's something wrong with Indigenous peoples and we need to be transformed or changed in some way.
I've heard stories of people growing up, First Nations people growing up, not knowing their own culture. And so from a white person perspective, I don't know the First Nations culture. I'm thankful that I was brought up from a place of respecting and loving people around you no matter what. But I'm doing that without a clear understanding of some of the things that have been lost and squashed in the First Nations culture. How can the ignorant get more educated in a way that will build empathy and understanding?
Well, I think in part is doing what we're doing tonight, which is sitting down as a society, a broader society, and talking with each other, sharing with each other what's in our hearts and in our minds about the future, how we want our children to live, the kind of society that we want our grandchildren to grow up in and be a part of. I think that's where it begins and it starts, because racism is a symptom of a society where people are, there's a great division or a divide, and there's a lack of empathy and connection and understanding. And so we need to find ways to close those gaps and to address those fundamental problems.
Thank you for taking the time.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
I feel like we're just getting warmed up and getting the conversation started. There will be more open discussion series presented in partnership with Vancouver Island University, the Nanaimo First Nation, and the City of Nanaimo. What those will look like, when they're coming, we don't know, but we'll let you know when we do. In the meantime, here's your Island Chef. That brings us to the end of this edition of Go Island, From Racism to Reconciliation, Sharing Visions of Nanaimo's Future, Part 1 in a series that's path is yet to be laid out, and we will keep you posted as things develop. Thanks for watching this edition of Go Island. We'll see you next time.